I'm Professor Buck Rogers, and I'm the owner of Rocky Cyber. I was previously CISO at British Aerospace, Bank of England, and Head of Resilience Risk for HSBC.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Darren Chapman. I am the founder of CyberScale. We're a cybersecurity consulting and training firm based in Norwich, and we've been operating for around 6 years. And we work in the governance, risk and compliance area of cyber and information security.
Thank you.
If we look at the finance sector, do people do what they expect to do within cyberspace because it's the right thing to do, or are they doing it because if they don't, there's regulatory penalty for it? And I would say you've got a good 50-50 split where they do some of it because they know it's the right thing to do, and the rest is driven purely by the fact there's a regulatory stick, which is why everyone sees the finance sector as far more mature than other sectors, because there is that regulatory censor and it affects their books and their liquidity, etc.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that from what I see in terms of that being more mature in that aspect. I think in terms of the companies who work with us, the proportion of those who are doing it because it's the right thing to do is probably smaller. There's normally one of 3 or 4 reasons that they're starting to treat their cyber information security more seriously. The first of those is they've had a breach; they don't want to have another one.
Yeah.
The second one is around suppliers, supplier due diligence. So that's really the customers driving them to do more, which you could actually, in some cases, is driven at a higher level by regulation. But it's the companies we're working with are doing it because the clients are asking them for it. Increasingly, insurance. So cyber insurance becoming more difficult to get, more stringent in terms of its requirements. And then there is the regulation piece as well, but that tends to be more in specific sectors and at a higher level.
And would you say so if you look at the finance sector now, I would say there's a drive, especially within the regulatory space, to be take a more risk-based approach because they're more mature, so they should in theory have controls. From them, your bits, would you say it's more focused on technical controls rather than having sort of board-level risk discussions?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and I think actually that move towards being more risk-based is a good thing. I think it's in a lot of cases is quite, when you bring in regulation, particularly when you first bring it in, it's quite binary in terms of here's a list of things that you need to do, and I guess part of that because you're trying to do something at scale and perhaps you don't know how to assess it very well in terms of kind of a maturity-based approach. But I think that's one of the challenges we see, particularly in that SME market, is it is quite binary and specific things that actually in a lot of cases are appropriate for some companies and not so appropriate for other companies.
So how do you make it less tick box? Because you get a lot of the old regulation is tick box, isn't it? PCI, DSS,
Yes.
tick, 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 rather than it being you can take a risk-based approach to the regulation as long as you can justify the way you do it.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I guess where that's happening, we need to probably learn from that in other sectors. I think probably moving from more to kind of a risk-based or a maturity-based approach, where actually you're looking at the broader perspective of what does the security and resilience look like for an organisation, based on something other than just 10 questions.
Yeah. You mentioned it works to a point because I think regulation works to a point because it makes people do what they should be doing, but they don't necessarily want to do. Where it goes wrong is you either end up with a tick box approach that you do what's required to meet the regulation requirements outside the bigger picture, and you just want to be in the middle of the pack. You don't want to be that manky old gazelle around the watering hole about to be picked up by the lions. You want to be with the middle. So I think that's an issue where it goes wrong, and then there's a lack of flexibility at times, I think. But without regulation, I don't know whether we would be as mature as we are. And perhaps that's why the US is more mature than the UK, because they've got a stronger line.
Exactly, and I was just going to say that about the US. I feel like the US is ahead of us in terms of regulating, and I think a lot is in the implementation, as we were talking about a minute ago. But ultimately, there has to be something driving companies to do more and do better. And I guess there's all sorts of things, right?
And the other thing as well is, how do the regulators have the right skills to be able to write and deliver the regulation? Because you know yourself, it's a competitive marketplace for cyber skills, and regulators traditionally are public bodies and don't pay that well.
No.
And so if you're not careful, the regulators will always be outgunned by the regulated, because they've got a bigger skill, they can pay more. Yeah,
no, it's true. Yeah, I think it's definitely something that we need more of, but we have to be careful how we implement it.
It should be scalable.
And I think a lot of it comes back to as well, what's your ethos as a company? Right? Are you improving your cybersecurity because you get it and you understand the responsibility that you've got around the data that you store for your clients? Or are you just literally doing the bare minimum to get the tick in the box? And I think with a lot of regulatory regulations and frameworks alike, you take something like a Cyber Essentials or an ISO 27001, right? Both of those very different, but what you get out of that really depends on how you approach it. You can actually use those frameworks as a real kind of helping hand in terms of actually improving your security as an organization, or you can pretty much get nothing out of it in terms of that if you approach it
I get asked that a few times about what framework to do, and I just do the Pepsi Code. Pepsi Code, both brown fizzy drinks, take your pick, and same with frameworks. And then the skill comes down to what you said, Dan. Get somebody like CyberScale to help you deploy the framework properly, so you maximise it, not just go on this compliant end.
There's obviously a big part of the government strategy around cyber, and I think in aviation, the CAA are mandating as one of their regulations, some of the requirements of that. And I think over time, there's lots of companies in the aviation industry, right? Picking on aviation as an example, and there's lots of companies of lots of different sizes who do lots of different things. If you look right down the supply chain, so if you take a set of requirements, which are quite extensive to improve cyber resilience, and you apply that to an airline, that's probably appropriate, right? But there's lots of companies in that supply chain who make up part of that security picture, who might be really, really small, and actually there's really necessary things for them to do, but it has to be to a level where they can actually achieve it, right? So for instance, you've got a 5-person company who's writing a piece of software for an airline. Realistically, they're not going to have a full-time CISO, but there are things that they do need to do. So I think what we've seen is over time, there's different CAF profiles being created and applied to different levels of organisation, and over time that's fine, and I think that concept works. But in the interim, what we've seen is the airlines have the extensive set of requirements, and because of the supply chain element of that, they then kind of push those requirements down to some of the suppliers without seeing whether they're appropriate or not. They're just saying, we've got to do them, so you've got to do them. Those suppliers then go back and say, well, hold the ones who can kind of interpret it, because obviously if they don't have a full-time information security person, it's quite difficult to sometimes interpret what those requirements are. But then go back, it's difficult to have a conversation with the airline and say, well, actually, this whole set of requirements is not appropriate for us because of the size, but we can do this, this, and this. That conversation is really difficult to have, because the airline don't either have the capacity or the willingness to have that conversation with 1,000 different suppliers.
And I think that's, being controversial, that's where NTSC have got it wrong. Because they hand down the tablets from the mountains, and at times there's a lack of interpretation. So it will go to a big multinational airline who will go, throw it over the fence, and we expect you to do that, rather than NCSC making it clear that there should be a scaled approach depending on risk and profile. And also I think it becomes difficult because outside of the UK or outside NCSC, everyone's looking at NIST, whereas NCSC not invented here, so they don't look at NIST. I think that confuses things as well, where you have a regulatory requirement for your industry and then a framework that everyone else expects you to use.
Yeah, I mean, with that, and a lot of other industries, if you look at kind of supply chain due diligence as well. It's trying to get ahead of it, right? Because actually, across lots of different industries, if you look at companies who are supplying the bigger companies and are maybe starting to get asked more questions about security, if all of your that's starting to happen, and if it hasn't started to happen, it's going to start to happen, right? In wherever your industry is, and if your competitors aren't doing what they need to be doing for that, and you start doing it before, then you do get a competitive edge. But that's a time-limited opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So if you wait until you have to do it, you're in the same boat as everybody else. If you get ahead of it and you go, okay, this is coming, let's do something about it now, then maybe that gives you a competitive edge.
And you also get earlier access to talent and the skills you need.
Yeah,
because otherwise there'll be a big pile in, and I'm sure you'll see that in Europe with DORA and NIST 2 and all that, MES 2 coming through.
Yeah.
Whereas get in early, get the talent.
Yeah.
I think I give this a lot of thought. So I think the issue now becomes, worst case scenario, the board may not care about cyber, but you can bet your bottom dollar your customers do. And I think there's starting to change now, where you get more mature customers who will expect more. You know, at one point, will there be a name and shame of cyber badness type stuff? I think customers expect more, and it becomes a competitive edge if done correctly. Where I think it goes wrong is they then use that competitive edge not to share information with their peers, but I think customers expect it more, and that's where they'll demand more.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously we mentioned the ones that we do see in terms of cyber insurance and supply chain and those kind of things. But yeah, that I think the customer thing is quite big, isn't it? I mean, if you look at the statistics of some of the surveys, like the government surveys around customer attitudes towards cybersecurity and privacy, they're fairly well understood now that there's a lot of customers who will move away from companies who've maybe not just that they've had a data breach, but actually if it's then shown that that was through some negligence on their part, or really not doing as much as they perhaps could have been doing, then they definitely lose credibility and trust.
I think that's where the growing role of the CISO needs to change. If you've got a CISO, that needs to be that much more risk-based. They understand the value chain, they understand what the customers expect, rather than it just being this technical issue, and then they can translate that to the board, so the board get it.
Yeah, I think we also need a lot more kind of transparency and honesty as well, right? If every data breach that you ever hear was sophisticated, and we all know that many of them are not sophisticated at all. So we need more people holding their hands up with that kind of stuff, because it just if you hear that, you're just like
And I find that what is it now? It's not if, it's when. I find that patronising. Take that to a board, not if when. So why I'm giving you all this money? You know what I mean? I expect you to take a risk-based approach, come up with a set of mitigations, not, well, it's not if, when.
But this is...
You need to be able to break the Metro protocol. And what I mean by that is, Metro, free newspaper in London, there's some shocking cyber headline on it. You go into work that morning, and the board, what's going on? You need to get to the position where your senior leadership team is mature enough that they can pick up a news headline and go, I'm not bothered about that because I know what controls in place, and not go, well, they've got that bit of software and what this bit of software, why haven't we got that? And they can take a mature-based approach because they understand, because they're well briefed and they understand the risks, and it's not about, I need that other shiny box. And then I think some of the vendors are aggressive in some respects, and if you lack confidence in your knowledge and your controls, then it's an easy win. I'm going to buy this shiny box and put this in because that's going to do like a cyber unicorn, make the world better. You know what I mean? And I think we need more challenge. Actually, as peers, speak to each other.
Yeah.
Because there's a load of examples out there to go, what do you think, Darren? What do you think, Simon? Have you used this? But we tend not to, because we don't want to be embarrassed. We've got egos. I loathe them. So I'd much prefer to go for a smaller organisation, and I've used improved sales. I've worked for CyberScale, and because I've got value for money, I've got focus because I understand it, and they take time to understand that. Not once when I worked for CyberScale did you recommend a product. You just helped us put stuff in context, and then we made our decisions about what we needed.
Yeah, and I think that education piece is really key, isn't it? Like you said earlier on, I like your metro analogy. That's one of the big problems is that organisations, particularly like SME organisations, don't have that talent or experience. They don't have someone in a security focused role, so they're always kind of fighting against the don't know what you don't know syndrome. So that education and the willingness, I guess, of boards and senior leadership to go out and actually say, well, we need to know more about this stuff. We don't know enough, and either go and educate themselves or bring someone in to help with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and actually, when you go for the board, sometimes saying, I ain't got an answer to this, rather than expecting you've got to turn up and it's got to be a perfect pitch, so I don't know. And because that's what the board is there for. They're there to give you that expert coverage and that view. And I find a lot of non-execs, they sit in lots of different companies, use it. Use their knowledge and from what they see elsewhere to help in your own organisation.
I think that's really important, actually, because that's one of the things we will occasionally talk about from a VCISO perspective. Is I think you do get that. If you're if you're embedded in a company, that's great in some respects because you understand, you have the time to really get into it and understand all the ins and outs of that company. But from a broader cyber perspective, you'll start to kind of lose that wider perspective on what's going on. So like you say, the non-exec roles, when we're doing the virtual CISO stuff, actually we see things in maybe even in different industries that are happening in different sectors that is perhaps relevant in another sector. We saw this last week, and we can apply that across a broad spectrum of customers.
I think I haven't been a CISO that fresh view sometimes, because you tend to get sniper stare where you're looking at stuff so close to you. Something to go, actually, look, this is normal. I've seen this before.
That sort of slightly removed perspective is always useful.
Because I've worked for a lot of large multinational organisations, I think where it becomes difficult is if you're a CISO for a small to medium business, I think, because you don't necessarily have the budget, you don't have the size of the team to help you, but the challenges you face is the same.
I mean, the first challenge probably for a lot of SME organisations is actually finding someone, because there's not. In a lot of cases, I think CISOs in large organisations, that's something that's been a thing for a while. But in smaller organisations, more and more, you're needing someone in that role or a very similar role to that, and they perhaps don't exist, right? Or they exist, but they've been working in bigger companies, and they have the choice to go to other bigger companies. So there's a shortage of the amount of people with that experience. So in a lot of cases, if you're in an SME organisation, you might be the first CISO there, or you've joined, or you've come into that role. Even if they've had a CISO previously, there's not going to be one around who's gone to another position in that company generally. So you're not probably going to have a lot of support within your organisation. So if you're new to that role, the support has to probably come from outside.
I think when I chat to other CISOs, especially in that sort of space, I think almost having that buddying up or that external, like you said a minute ago, that external view. So you were head of IT security and they're going to make you a CISO, or you've been recruited to be a network manager and they're going to be a CISO. That external sort of virtual CISO type stuff to come along and help you, I think would be key.
I think peer groups would be great, obviously. And I think there's some industries that are a lot better at talking to each other and having peer groups and things like that than others. Some of them are quite close, like you say, and they don't want to share. But then also, even whether you're in a CISO or a large organisation, or particularly if you're in a smaller one, you also have to, fight the expectation that you're then going to do everything from a security point of view. And you won't have the time or the resources to do everything that you need. So perhaps then looking outside for some services that will support you in that. So things like incident response exercises, for instance. You're not going to run all of those as a CISO, because you can't just run it as one person. Plus, you're obviously part of the team who's doing the response, right? So you need someone, generally from outside who's going to help run those types of things for you.
Yeah, and another thing as well, I think we need to get better is looking after each other. Because so take for example, I don't know, BBC or some organisation's breach, we all go, "Phew, but they're bad controls." Not, do I know the CISO? Can I reach? Yeah, can I reach out to CISO? Do you need a hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we can do better as well.
Or you could just ring them up and say, if you didn't have this tool, you wouldn't have got breached.
Yeah, which they do, and that's something
Never
else.
seen that.
I mean, the amount of cyber ambulance chasers, it's like, yeah, it is. But I do think we should do better as if we want to be a profession, then let's act like one at times, I think.
Yeah.
Know when you need help, and then also be free to offer your help.
Yeah, and I do see, I see elements of that. I see people, I do see a bit more visibility of that happening now, and a bit more calling out, the old approach. So I think it is gradually improving, but it's definitely needed.
I think we're now in the era of CISO 2.0. What I mean by that, I think there's going to be a split. Originally you had, I don't know, say 3-4 generations of the internet. First it was academic, and it was all about IT security. Then it was commercial, and it was everything, wasn't it? Yeah. E or I everything, and you had an IT security person. Then you had the CISO, and now it's become a national imperative, I think, which is the fourth incarnation of the internet. CISOs need to change to meet that. There's a growing demand for CISOs to understand risk, to understand the business and the value chain, to be able to work at a higher level outside of technology. And that's where I think there'll be a rebirth of almost a first line head of IT security with a second line CISO who looks at the risk and the business context, with the first line CISO, IT security person, looks at the control infrastructure. Because I think for the CISO to survive, they need to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's a key skill, isn't it? It's understanding. I almost see the CISOs as almost like a translator. Right?
Yeah.
It's you've got to understand at least at a reasonable level, the technical elements of security but also the process and everything that is around that. But you've also got to understand what the business is trying to achieve, and you've got to be able to talk at both levels and maybe do that translation layer. And I think, I've seen a fair bit is that's quite often where you've got in organisations, you've got IT people who know that there's more that needs to be done, but they're not necessarily used to articulating the things that they need to articulate at a board level, and actually that CISO quite often is that translation layer.
I think the other thing as well is it's good for talent retention, because how many out and out cyber technical people you met who've got no wish to be a CISO. If you want to get paid more, you want to get the right level of seniority, then you have to go that route, and they're completely unsuited to it. Whereas if you say we're going to have a slight split within the profession, you can do that, because you become a first line type of technical CISO and then second line risk type CISO, I think. So that gives you that as well. So there's a joining together. But you are right, it's about translating it. I can't remember, I saw somebody going, "I would patch X," and the board member said, "I'm interested in that." If you come to me and said, "You do realise of your 80% revenue generating systems, only 30% is patch," I'll listen. If you go, 80% of my systems aren't patched, don't care. And it's that little change in the language, I think, really helps.
Yeah.
You need relevance, because the problem is you can't do death by PowerPoint, and you need to tailor, I think, the message for the audience. So you may, the board message may be completely different and snappier than a new joiner or an apprentice. So for example, I've done 15-minute tabletop for the board. So we'll pick some random thing, do a 15-minute instant response practice, and that's good enough for them to go, "Oh, that makes sense," compared to an apprentice where they've inappropriately used a memory stick and they've clearly not done that, so you've done a longer as part of the training process. I think at times we just think, well, we're going to do some phishing tests, and you'll do a click-through thing and that's job done. Yeah,
I think absolutely relevance, like you say. I think keeping it front of mind all the time. I think I see a lot of organisations who'll do one of two things. They'll either do they'll do an annual awareness training, which might be delivered by a trainer, which is great. I think that's always more effective when you can actually get in front of people, but that's not scalable all the time. So they might do that, or they might do ongoing computer-based training stuff with some phishing awareness. but they won't do both. So I think you need to maximize the impact of the training that you're doing. You need to tailor it, like you say, and make sure it's relevant. You need to try and keep it front of mind all the time, do a variation of things. And also, but I guess fundamentally it's like it's almost just akin to security in general. You need to kind of define a strategy and a plan that is aligned to your business and work to that plan, rather than just picking things out and going, oh, we'll do a bit of this and we'll do a bit of that.
I think that's where you were really successful when you helped me in a previous role with the CAF training, because you made time to understand the audience and you made it relevant both to their work practice and their home practice. And I remember some of the exercises we did, and they were still talking about it long after you'd gone, and it really hit home. What was a difficult audience who were at times less than keen to have to go through it, but because you had that link between work and home and stuff that was real at that moment in time, I think that really hit the message home.
Yeah, I think the personal stuff's really important as well. I didn't say that. We try and do that a lot, because I think a lot of the things that we need to be thinking about all the time from a security point of view are the same, whether it's in business or whether it's personally. But personal resonates with people better. And if we always talk about trying to build a culture of security. Well, the way that you do that is by changing the way that people think about it and trying to make sure that you change your behaviour. And you're more likely to do that, in my opinion, by focusing more on what's relevant to people personally than actually when they go to work. Because when they finish work, they switch off and they go home. And, it's not. And also, let's face it, if there's an incident at work, it's not you as most of the employees who are going to be dealing with that. It's somebody else. If it happens to you personally, you've got to deal with that. So
I mean, you see the shock from someone having their personal bank account turned over compared to CEO fraud and just on their money. It's two completely different things.
Absolutely.
It's trying to get that golden thread to link the two together.
And again, but you can put a positive spin on that as well, right? Because actually, if you're training people in the workplace, but you're giving them training on personal security as well, they can take that home. They can tell their families about that. They can tell their elderly relatives and give them some tips to protect them a little bit better. And you're giving them something that's really valuable to them, rather than just going, "Oh, make sure you protect the business."
And I think that actually almost comes full circle to one of the questions at the beginning, I think, about the board. And I think that's sometimes perhaps where we don't get the message, because boards are normally short-term, 2 to 3 years. And when we go into the training and education bit with them, we're all a bit bland without any impact. Whereas if you can say to board, okay, you heard about China, Russia, but if they steal intellectual property, 18 months down the line, your magic widget, it's not magic anymore, and you're going to lose X, rather than just this big thing on Russia, Ukraine, and what's going on in the Middle East. Making those type of high-level attacks relevant. And relevant to them as an individual, because they're accountable for it. There's a lot of regulation, and also it's going to be their future profits, bonuses.
I think again, it links back to, why are you doing security? Why are you doing security awareness training? Are you doing it because actually you understand that it's really important for building the security and the resilience of your organisation and managing risk, or are you doing it because you need to tick a box?
Make it fun. I mean, doing cybersecurity now has got to be one of the best jobs in the world. So much scope, there's so much ability to fit in, depending on a range of personalities and skill sets. It's so good. Make the training fun so people can buy into the enthusiasm and passion that you've got as well.
Might pick up some new security people along the way as well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think you need a range of skills, support by a range of backgrounds, ethnicity, etc., to make a team. And I think if you look around at times, you can see that there's a stereotype where you see the old PowerPoint slide, don't you? Hoodie, stuff like that. You can take things, people return to work after maternity leave. People want second careers, for example. There's a massive untapped wealth of skills there, because you want people able to analyse stuff. They're presentable, they can talk, and they have confidence. You don't necessarily need. You can get the in-depth skills by osmosis. I think it's more general skills which we need to tap in better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, particularly like with us doing kind of focusing the GRC side, the skill sets that are really key for us are the ability to run a workshop and the ability to talk to C-level executives and the ability to talk to lots of different people in the organisation and run training sessions and things like that. They're not and like you say, I think the technical skills are always easier to teach, and technical knowledge is easier to impart. It's those kind of soft skills that you get, and you can get those from some really broad backgrounds. And people who've done roles that are nothing to do with cyber at all, but have got brilliant skills in those areas. So we need to kind of, we need to, I guess, think outside the box a little bit more.
Because a lot of the, and I mean this with respect, a lot of the traditional cyber skill, what's the old joke? How do you know a cyber extrovert? He looks you in the face when he's talking to you rather than your feet. And we most probably need more extroverts and people like that to deliver that message in a punchy, in a different way. And actually,